Emily had been working at the Silverwood Animal Shelter for nearly a decade, dedicating every ounce of her energy to rescuing, healing, and rehoming animals. Despite the long hours and the heartbreaking cases, she never grew weary. She often said that each animal had its own unique spirit, and helping them find peace was her calling. But even with all her experience, nothing could have prepared her for that rainy autumn night when a stranger arrived with an unexpected guest. It was close to midnight, and Emily was just finishing her paperwork when she heard a knock at the shelter's back door. Surprised, she put down her pen, a little unease settling in her stomach. The shelter wasn't in a particularly dangerous area, but late-night visits were rare. She approached the door cautiously, peeking through the small glass pane before opening it. Standing there, drenched from the rain, was a middle-aged man with a look of worry etched deep into his face. He held the end of a frayed red leash in his hand, and at the other end was a large, white dog with soulful, tired eyes. The dog's fur was soaked, her head lowered, and there was a silent resignation in her posture that struck Emily instantly. "Can I help you?" she asked, trying to read the man's expression. He cleared his throat, looking a bit uneasy. "I found her wandering near the old forest road," he began, his voice filled with a mix of hesitation and sadness. "She looked lost, hungry, but I don't think she's just a stray." Emily knelt down to get a better look at the dog, her heart already softening. The dog, who she would later name Daisy, met her gaze with a look that was both guarded and yearning. Emily reached out her hands slowly, and Daisy, after a moment's hesitation, leaned forward, gently pressing her nose against Emily's palm. "She's beautiful," Emily murmured, feeling the warmth of Daisy's breath against her skin. She glanced back up at the man. "Thank you for bringing her here. Do you know anything else about her?" The man shook his head. "Not much. I tried to see if anyone in the area knew her, but it's almost as if she just appeared out of nowhere." He hesitated, glancing at Daisy. "She didn't resist when I put the leash on her, but there's something different about her, almost like she's been waiting for someone." Emily noticed the peculiar look in Daisy's eyes as the man spoke, almost as if the dog understood every word. A shiver ran down her spine, though she couldn't quite pinpoint why. "We'll take good care of her," she assured the man, who nodded, visibly relieved. With a final, grateful nod, he left, disappearing into the night as quietly as he had come. Emily led Daisy inside, watching as the dog moved with a quiet grace, her head swiveling slightly as if taking in every detail of her new surroundings. There was an elegance in Daisy's movements, a quiet dignity that seemed to set her apart from the other strays. It was clear that she was no ordinary dog. As she guided Daisy to an empty kennel, Emily found herself speaking softly to the dog, explaining everything as though Daisy could understand. "This will be your temporary home," she said, reaching out to give Daisy a reassuring pat. "Just until we figure out where you belong." Daisy settled into the kennel without protest, lying down and resting her head on her paws. Her gaze remained fixed on Emily, her eyes following every move Emily made, filled with an intensity that was almost unsettling. Emily felt an inexplicable urge to stay, to sit with Daisy through the night. But she shook the feeling off, reminding herself that she had other animals to check on. As she made her rounds through the shelter, the image of Daisy lingered in her mind. There was something about those eyes, wise, knowing, as if they carried stories untold. Emily had seen countless animals pass through the shelter, but none had struck her quite like Daisy. When she finally returned to her office, she found herself unable to focus on her paperwork. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Daisy's mysterious appearance, the silent intelligence in her gaze, and the unsettling sense that there was more to this dog than met the eye. Emily shook her head, laughing softly at herself. "You're imagining things, Emily," she muttered, but the unease didn't fade. Later that night, as she prepared to leave, Emily made one last stop by Daisy's kennel. The dog was still awake, her eyes reflecting the dim light of the hallway as she watched Emily with that same intense stare. Emily knelt by the kennel door, reaching out her hand through the bars. "Good night, Daisy," she whispered, naming the dog on a whim. "You're safe here." To her surprise, Daisy leaned forward, pressing her head against Emily's hand in a gesture so gentle it took Emily's breath away. In that moment, Emily felt an unspoken bond form between them, a connection that was both unexpected and deeply comforting. As she locked up the shelter for the night, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Whatever secrets Daisy held, Emily was determined to uncover them. And little did she know, Daisy's arrival would set off a chain of events that would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, Emily arrived at the shelter just after sunrise, eager to check on Daisy. The quiet of the early hour was calming, broken only by the occasional chirping of birds outside and the soft rustling of animals stirring in their kennels. As she made her way down the hallway, she noticed that a few of the other animals were oddly quiet, as if sensing something new, something different. When she reached Daisy's kennel, Emily found her lying in the same position as the night before, her head on her paws, watching Emily approach. Daisy's eyes, though softer now, still held that mysterious intensity. Emily opened the kennel and knelt down, reaching out her hand. "Good morning, Daisy. How was your first night here?" Daisy's tail wagged slowly, a gentle swish across the kennel floor. She leaned into Emily's touch, pressing her head against Emily's hand in a way that felt almost deliberate, as if she was offering comfort rather than seeking it. Emily smiled, feeling her heart warm at the gesture. "You really are something special, aren't you?" As Emily took Daisy out into the yard for some fresh air, she noticed how Daisy moved, gracefully, confidently, as if she was already familiar with her surroundings. Most newly arrived animals were anxious, exploring with cautious steps and sniffing every corner, but not Daisy. She walked with purpose, her head held high, her gaze alert. It was as if she was already surveying her new territory. Emily released the leash, letting Daisy roam freely. The dog didn't wander far, though. Instead, she circled the yard, her nose to the ground, moving in a methodical pattern as if following an invisible trail. Emily watched, intrigued by Daisy's behavior. There was a natural, almost instinctual intelligence in the way she moved, unlike anything Emily had seen in other rescue dogs. As Daisy explored, a young stray cat named Oliver, who had been at the shelter for a few weeks, padded cautiously into the yard. Emily's eyes darted between Daisy and Oliver, a little apprehensive. Though Daisy had shown no signs of aggression, it was hard to predict how an animal might react to others, especially in a new environment. To her surprise, Daisy stopped her exploration and sat down, watching Oliver with a gentle curiosity. The cat, sensing no threat, approached Daisy slowly, his tail flicking back and forth as he moved closer. Emily held her breath, watching as Oliver walked right up to Daisy and sniffed her outstretched paw. Then, in a gesture that left Emily stunned, Daisy lowered her head gently, almost as if bowing, allowing Oliver to nuzzle her cheek. It was an incredibly tender moment, a silent exchange of trust and acceptance. Emily felt a lump rise in her throat as she realized that Daisy had some sort of calming effect on the other animals, a quality she'd never seen in any other dog. "Well, aren't you full of surprises?" Emily whispered, her voice filled with admiration. Over the next few days, Emily continued to notice small but significant moments that set Daisy apart. One morning, while she was feeding the shelter's animals, she saw Daisy once again, showing her unusual behavior. An elderly hound named Max, who had a reputation for being grouchy and solitary, was sitting in his usual corner, far from the other dogs. Daisy approached him carefully, her movements slow and respectful. She stopped a few feet away from him, lowering her body in a way that looked almost submissive, like she was silently communicating something Emily couldn't quite understand. Max, usually quick to snarl at any approaching animal, simply looked at Daisy, his gaze softening. To Emily's astonishment, he allowed Daisy to sit beside him, even leaning against her slightly as if seeking comfort. The sight was so unexpected, so heartwarming that Emily found herself tearing up. It was clear that Daisy had a way with other animals, a natural, calming energy that Emily could only describe as extraordinary. The more Emily observed Daisy, the more intrigued she became. What kind of past could a dog like Daisy have had? She seemed too wise, too gentle for a stray. It was as if she had lived many lives, gathering knowledge and kindness along the way. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Daisy was here for a reason, that her arrival at the shelter was no mere coincidence. That evening, as she sat alone in her office, Emily decided to do a bit of research. She typed a quick description into the search bar. Large white dog with calming effect on animals. As she scrolled through the results, she found articles on therapy dogs, emotional support animals, and even some accounts of service dogs with special training. But none of the descriptions quite matched Daisy's peculiar behavior. The next day, Emily decided to test a theory. She brought Daisy into the main shelter area, where several of the more anxious animals were kept. One of the dogs, a small terrier named Buster, was particularly fearful of loud noises and sudden movements, often trembling whenever someone entered the room. Emily approached Buster's kennel with Daisy, unsure of what would happen. To her amazement, as soon as Daisy came close, Buster's trembling lessened. He approached the front of the kennel, sniffing cautiously through the bars. Daisy stood calmly, her presence seemingly soothing him. Emily couldn't believe what she was seeing. Buster, a dog who rarely allowed anyone near him, was pressing his small nose through the bars, eager to be closer to Daisy. Emily's heart swelled with wonder. Daisy wasn't just a calming influence, she was a healer in her own way, bringing peace to animals who had known nothing but fear and abandonment. It was almost magical. At that moment, Emily made a decision. She would uncover Daisy's past, no matter how long it took. She needed to know where Daisy came from, who she was, and how she had come to possess such an extraordinary gift. The mystery surrounding Daisy had taken hold of Emily's thoughts completely. She couldn't ignore the way Daisy seemed to soothe even the most fearful animals with nothing more than her presence. It was as if Daisy carried an invisible gift, a healing aura that radiated calmness. The thought of uncovering Daisy's past became Emily's new mission, filling her with a strange mix of excitement and determination. The next morning, Emily decided to start by checking local shelters and rescue organizations. Maybe, she thought, someone had reported a missing dog matching Daisy's description. Sitting at her desk with a notebook in hand, she began calling nearby shelters one by one, describing Daisy and asking if anyone had reported a similar dog. Large white dog, gentle temperament, uncommonly calm around other animals. No microchip found, she recited over and over. But every call led to a dead end, with no reports of a missing dog that matched Daisy's unique qualities. Each unanswered question only deepened Emily's resolve. As she was finishing up her calls, her colleague Sarah walked by and noticed the stack of notes and photos Emily had collected. "Still trying to figure out where Daisy came from?" she asked with a warm smile. Emily nodded, a bit sheepish. "I just can't let it go. She's different, Sarah. She has this presence. I've never seen anything like it." Sarah laughed softly. "You've always had a knack for picking out the special ones, haven't you? Maybe Daisy's just meant to be here with us, no past needed." But Emily's curiosity wouldn't let her rest. That afternoon, she decided to expand her search online. She posted a description of Daisy on a few local forums and animal lover groups, hoping someone might recognize her. Each time she described Daisy's eyes, her calm aura, and the strange, soothing effect she had on other animals, Emily felt an almost unshakable certainty. Daisy had a story, and it was only a matter of time before she discovered it. Days passed, and despite Emily's efforts, she received no responses. She tried to push her disappointment aside, focusing instead on Daisy's daily routine at the shelter. Daisy had settled into her new life, quickly becoming a favorite among the staff and volunteers. Every day, her gentle spirit seemed to draw people in, providing comfort to both animals and humans alike. One afternoon, as Emily walked Daisy around the yard, she noticed something peculiar. A group of children from a local school had come for a visit, their excited voices filling the air as they met the shelter animals. As they approached the yard, Daisy immediately perked up, her tail wagging slowly as she walked toward the children. Emily watched, fascinated, as Daisy gently positioned herself in the middle of the group, sitting down and allowing each child to pet her in turn. There was something ceremonial in the way Daisy moved, as if she understood the importance of each interaction. The children's faces lit up as they petted her soft fur, their laughter filling the air. One little girl, who had been standing back shyly, finally approached Daisy, her hand trembling slightly as she reached out. Emily noticed the hesitation in the girl's eyes. She had the kind of nervous look that suggested she wasn't used to being around animals. Daisy, sensing this, lowered her head even more, staying perfectly still as the girl's tiny fingers brushed her fur. Slowly, the girl's face broke into a smile, her initial fear melting away. Emily's heart swelled as she realized that Daisy was aware of the girl's hesitation and had adjusted her behavior to comfort her. It was another reminder of Daisy's extraordinary nature, one that only deepened Emily's desire to understand her past. Later that evening, as she reflected on Daisy's day with the children, Emily's phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced at the screen and saw a message from an anonymous account on one of the animal forums where she'd posted. The message was brief, almost cryptic. "Your dog sounds familiar. Check the sanctuary records at Pine Valley." Emily's pulse quickened. Pine Valley was an old animal sanctuary about 2 hours away, a place known for taking in animals from unusual backgrounds. She'd heard of it in passing, but had never been there herself. The message didn't offer any more details, but it was enough to set her on a new path. The following morning, Emily made arrangements to visit Pine Valley. She called the sanctuary to explain her situation, mentioning Daisy's unique traits and her desire to learn more. To her surprise, the staff were welcoming, intrigued by her story, and eager to help. It seemed that they, too, believed that some animals carried stories worth uncovering. As she prepared for the trip, Emily felt a growing sense of anticipation mixed with a touch of anxiety. What would she find at Pine Valley? Would she finally uncover Daisy's origins? She glanced down at Daisy, who sat patiently by her side, her calm eyes gazing back at Emily as if to say, "I trust you." With Daisy in the back seat, Emily set off, driving through winding roads surrounded by dense forests. The further she traveled, the more she felt like she was stepping into another world, one where time slowed down and the air carried a sense of mystery. Pine Valley was tucked away from the bustling city, nestled in a quiet part of the countryside where nature reigned supreme. When they finally arrived, Emily was greeted by a kind woman named Margaret, one of the sanctuary's longtime caretakers. Margaret had a gentle demeanor and an air of wisdom, the kind of presence that instantly put Emily at ease. "So, you're the one with the remarkable dog," Margaret said with a smile, glancing at Daisy. "I can see why you were drawn to us. We've had our share of animals with unique qualities." Emily felt a flicker of hope. "I don't know much about her past, but she has this incredible effect on other animals. I've never seen anything like it." Margaret nodded thoughtfully. "Let's take a look at the records and see if anything matches. Sometimes, these animals find their way to us for a reason." As they walked toward the sanctuary's archives, Emily's mind raced with possibilities. Daisy trotted by her side, calm as ever, but Emily sensed a hint of awareness in her movements, as if Daisy, too, felt the importance of this visit. They spent the next hour combing through records, looking for any mention of a dog that resembled Daisy. Though the process was slow, Emily didn't feel impatient. Each page they turned felt like a step closer to understanding the mystery that had brought Daisy into her life. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, Margaret paused, her finger resting on a faded photograph. The dog in the picture was large, white, and strikingly similar to Daisy, right down to the soulful eyes. "This one was brought here many years ago," Margaret explained softly. "She was part of a special breeding program. They were trying to create animals with therapeutic abilities, animals who could heal others." Emily's breath caught as she listened, her heart pounding. Could Daisy be connected to something like this? Emily's heart raced as she absorbed Margaret's words. The idea that Daisy might be connected to a therapeutic breeding program was as fascinating as it was unsettling. She glanced at Daisy, who sat calmly beside her, seemingly unaware of the weight of the discovery. "Therapeutic abilities?" Emily asked, her voice filled with wonder. "Are you saying Daisy was bred to help heal others?" Margaret nodded slowly. "Yes. Years ago, a group of researchers collaborated with animal behaviorists here at Pine Valley. They believed that certain animals could be trained or even bred with an innate ability to provide emotional comfort and therapeutic effects. It was an experiment, but the results were, well, let's just say they were astonishing." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She looked at the faded photograph again, imagining the journey that had brought Daisy into her life. The pieces were beginning to fit, but there were still so many unanswered questions. "What happened to the program?" Emily asked. curious but slightly wary of what she might learn. Margaret sighed, a hint of sadness in her eyes. The project was promising, but it ran out of funding. Many of the animals were adopted out, their records scattered. We tried to keep track, but over the years, some animals slipped through the cracks. She paused, glancing at Daisy with admiration. But it seems, some of these remarkable animals still find their way to the right people. Emily felt a surge of gratitude for having crossed paths with Daisy. She'd sensed from the beginning that Daisy was special, but knowing there was a reason behind her unique presence filled her with an even deeper sense of awe. "Is there any way to learn more about her specific background?" Emily asked, hopeful. Margaret pursed her lips thoughtfully. "There might be one person who could help. Dr. Lawson was the lead researcher for the program. He left the sanctuary years ago, but I believe he's still involved in animal therapy studies. I can give you his contact information." Emily took down the details, her mind already racing with questions she wanted to ask Dr. Lawson. She thanked Margaret for her help and left the sanctuary with a renewed sense of purpose. As they drove home, Emily glanced back at Daisy, who was lying peacefully in the back seat. "You're a mystery, aren't you?" Emily murmured, smiling. Daisy's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, calm and steady, as if to say, "We're in this together." A new lead. The next morning, Emily reached out to Dr. Lawson, explaining Daisy's unique traits and the sanctuary's records. To her surprise, he responded quickly, his tone both intrigued and cautious. He agreed to meet with her the following week, curious to see Daisy for himself. During the days leading up to the meeting, Emily's mind buzzed with anticipation. She began to notice even more details about Daisy's behavior, things she had taken for granted before. Daisy seemed to sense when someone was feeling sad or anxious, instinctively moving closer to offer comfort. She was more than a companion, she was a quiet guardian. Finally, the day arrived. Emily and Daisy met Dr. Lawson at a nearby park, where he could observe Daisy in a relaxed, natural setting. Dr. Lawson was a man in his 60s with a warm smile and a gentle demeanor that immediately put Emily at ease. As they walked and talked, Dr. Lawson observed Daisy closely, asking questions about her behavior and interactions with other animals and people. Emily shared stories of Daisy's calming effect on anxious animals at the shelter, her gentle approach with children, and her almost supernatural ability to sense emotions. After a while, Dr. Lawson stopped, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I believe Daisy is one of the animals from our program," he said quietly. "Her temperament, her behavior, it all aligns with what we were aiming to achieve." Emily's heart leapt. "So it's true? She really was bred for this?" Dr. Lawson nodded, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yes, and it seems she's fulfilling her purpose beautifully. Animals like Daisy have a gift, something that goes beyond training. They seem to possess an innate empathy, a way of understanding emotions that we humans are only beginning to comprehend." Emily felt a swell of pride and gratitude as she looked at Daisy. It was as though her faithful companion had been destined to find her, to bring healing and comfort into her life and the lives of others. As their conversation continued, Dr. Lawson explained more about the program, describing the rigorous selection and training processes involved. He spoke of the deep bonds that these animals formed with the people they helped, and how their presence could often bring comfort in ways that traditional therapies couldn't. But there was something else, a shadow of concern that lingered in Dr. Lawson's expression. "These animals," he began carefully, "often form such deep connections that they can take on the emotional burdens of those around them. In rare cases, it can become overwhelming. It's something to be mindful of, especially if Daisy continues to work in high-stress environments." Emily nodded, a wave of protectiveness washing over her. She hadn't considered the possibility that Daisy might be carrying some of the weight of the emotions she soothed in others. She made a silent promise to ensure that Daisy would have all the care and support she needed, just as she provided it for those around her. Back at the shelter, Emily couldn't shake Dr. Lawson's warning. Now that she was aware of the potential toll Daisy's empathy could take, she began to notice signs of exhaustion in her beloved companion. Although Daisy continued to offer her calm presence to animals and people alike, there were moments when she seemed to retreat into herself, curling up quietly in a corner as if needing to recharge. Emily started paying closer attention, monitoring Daisy's behavior throughout the day. She noticed that after particularly intense interactions, like soothing a dog who'd just been surrendered or comforting a volunteer who had been through a rough day, Daisy would seek out solitude. Emily realized that her gift, her ability to sense and soothe others' pain, might indeed be draining her. One evening, after a particularly busy day at the shelter, Daisy seemed unusually withdrawn. She lay on her bed, eyes half closed, her breathing slow and shallow. Emily sat beside her, gently stroking her fur. She whispered soothing words, hoping to comfort Daisy the way Daisy had comforted so many others. "You don't have to carry everyone's burdens, you know," Emily murmured, her voice soft with emotion. "You've done more than enough, my sweet girl." As if understanding, Daisy let out a small sigh, nuzzling Emily's hand. Emily's heart ached with gratitude and worry. She began to wonder if there were ways to ease Daisy's emotional load without limiting her interactions at the shelter, something that would allow Daisy to help others without depleting her own energy. The next day, Emily started researching ways to support emotional support animals. She learned about practices used by therapy dog handlers to help animals decompress after intense sessions, including quiet time in a comfortable space, soft music, and even gentle aromatherapy to calm their senses. Inspired, she began to incorporate these elements into Daisy's routine, hoping they would help her beloved dog recover from the day's stresses. In addition to these calming techniques, Emily also rearranged Daisy's schedule at the shelter. Rather than allowing her to interact continuously, she gave Daisy breaks in between visits, setting up a cozy area in her office where Daisy could rest undisturbed. Emily even introduced Daisy to a few new activities outside the shelter, such as taking longer walks in the forest and visiting a quiet dog park on weekends. These excursions allowed Daisy to experience the world beyond the shelter, a place where she could simply be a dog, free from the emotional burdens of others. One afternoon during one of their forest walks, Emily noticed a change in Daisy. She seemed more relaxed, her posture looser, and her tail wagged gently as she trotted through the trees. There was a sense of lightness to her movements, as if the weight she'd been carrying had begun to lift. Watching Daisy explore with such joy filled Emily's heart with relief. It was a reminder that while Daisy had a gift, she also needed time to recharge and enjoy the simple pleasures of life. A moment of revelation. One day, while watching Daisy interact with a particularly nervous dog at the shelter, Emily witnessed something remarkable. Instead of immediately comforting the dog, Daisy took a few steps back, giving the animal space to approach her on its own. The dog hesitated, sniffing the air, before cautiously moving closer. Daisy remained calm and patient, allowing the other dog to approach in its own time. It was a subtle shift in her usual approach, but Emily saw the wisdom in it. Daisy seemed to understand that not every creature needed immediate comfort. Sometimes they just needed the space to be themselves. This small moment felt like a revelation. Emily realized that Daisy, too, was adapting, finding ways to be there for others without losing herself. She was learning to balance her instinct to comfort with her need for self-care. Emily was moved by Daisy's resilience, her ability to navigate this delicate balance instinctively. Later that evening, as Emily sat with Daisy at home, she reflected on the journey they had been on together. The mystery of Daisy's past had led them both to an unexpected place, a deeper understanding of empathy, boundaries, and self-care. Emily marveled at how much she'd learned from Daisy, who, despite her quiet nature, had taught her more about compassion than any person ever had. "Thank you, Daisy," Emily whispered, stroking her soft fur, "for everything." Daisy, in her quiet way, looked up at Emily with gentle eyes, as if acknowledging the gratitude and the bond they shared. As the weeks passed, Daisy and Emily settled into their new rhythm. The calming practices Emily introduced seemed to help Daisy immensely, and she continued her work at the shelter with a renewed, steady energy. With each day, Daisy's approach and Emily's sensitivity to her needs became a source of inspiration for the other volunteers, who began adopting similar practices with their own therapy animals. One afternoon, while Emily was in her office, a young volunteer named Grace approached her, her expression a mix of excitement and uncertainty. Emily, could I talk to you for a moment? Grace asked, glancing down the hallway toward the play area where Daisy was resting. Of course, Grace. What's on your mind? Emily responded, gesturing for her to take a seat. Grace hesitated, then spoke. I've been watching how you work with Daisy. The way you give her breaks, the little routines you've introduced for her. It's amazing. I was wondering if you could teach me how to do the same with my dog, Milo. He gets so nervous around new people, and I feel like he's taking on too much stress like Daisy was. Emily's heart warmed at the request. She hadn't expected others to notice, let alone seek her guidance. But the idea of helping others understand and support their pets in the same way felt incredibly fulfilling. Of course, Grace, Emily replied with a smile. Every animal is unique, but I'd be happy to show you some techniques that might help Milo feel more at ease. The two spent the next hour discussing the methods Emily had used to help Daisy unwind, creating a quiet space, using calming scents, giving her time alone after intense interactions. Grace listened intently, nodding as she jotted down notes, eager to apply these practices with Milo. As they wrapped up, Grace looked at Emily with a newfound sense of admiration. I never realized how much our pets could feel and how much they take on from us. Thank you, Emily. I think this could make a real difference for Milo. Emily felt a swell of pride, not just for herself but for Daisy as well. She had come to see Daisy's influence as more than just the calming presence she provided. In her quiet way, Daisy was teaching others about compassion, patience, and the value of self-care, a legacy that extended beyond Emily and into the lives of everyone at the shelter. A heartfelt farewell. One day, as Emily was preparing to leave the shelter, she noticed a familiar face waiting by the door. Dr. Lawson. Surprised but pleased, she approached him, curious about his unannounced visit. Dr. Lawson, it's great to see you. What brings you here? Emily asked, shaking his hand warmly. Dr. Lawson smiled, glancing around at the bustling shelter. I heard about the work you and Daisy have been doing here. It's remarkable, truly. I wanted to see it for myself. Together, they took a quiet stroll through the shelter, observing the volunteers and animals, each interaction tinged with the warmth and empathy that Daisy had helped cultivate. Dr. Lawson's gaze softened as he watched Daisy interact with a young girl who had come in with her parents to adopt a dog. Daisy, as always, sensed the girl's nervousness and approached slowly, allowing her to pet her soft fur and gain confidence around the other dogs. It's incredible, Dr. Lawson murmured, his voice filled with awe. Daisy has not only embraced her role but has elevated it, influencing others in ways I never could have imagined. Emily nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for her loyal companion. She's taught us all so much, about empathy, resilience, and the importance of taking care of ourselves too. Dr. Lawson placed a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder. You've done something special here, Emily. Daisy's legacy will continue to make an impact long after today. Looking to the future. Later that evening, Emily took Daisy for a long walk through the forest, their favorite place to unwind together. The golden glow of the setting sun filtered through the trees, casting warm hues across the path as they strolled side by side. As they walked, Emily reflected on the journey they'd shared, from Daisy's mysterious origins to the profound impact she'd had on everyone around her. The bond they shared had evolved beyond that of owner and pet. They were partners, friends, and healers in their own way. Emily realized that her purpose, too, had grown alongside Daisy's, to not only provide comfort to animals in need, but to create a sanctuary where their unique gifts could be recognized and supported. When they returned home, Emily knelt beside Daisy, wrapping her arms around her in a warm embrace. Thank you, Daisy, she whispered, for everything you've given me and for everything you've given to everyone else. You've changed so many lives. Daisy, with her calm and knowing eyes, rested her head on Emily's shoulder as if to say, and you've changed mine. Months after that quiet evening in the forest, the shelter became a place that was talked about not only in the local community, but across nearby towns as well. News of the unique methods they used, thanks to Daisy's influence, spread far and wide. Volunteers from other shelters would visit to learn from Emily, eager to bring the same sense of empathy and respect for animals' emotional needs to their own work. Emily often felt Daisy's presence during these visits, especially as she shared the story of how her calm, empathetic companion had changed everything. Daisy's influence was evident in every corner of the shelter, from the way animals were handled with gentleness and patience to the new, calm spaces established throughout the facility, where animals and people alike could take a break from the bustling activity. One particular day, Emily received a letter from a shelter halfway across the country. The director, inspired by stories of Daisy, had implemented similar practices and wanted to express her gratitude. The letter shared how anxious animals had become more relaxed, how volunteers felt more connected, and how the shelter had become a truly healing space for both animals and humans. Emily felt a deep warmth as she read, knowing that Daisy's legacy was now reaching lives she would never meet. One crisp autumn morning, Emily decided to visit the forest clearing where Daisy had always loved to roam. It had been some time since her passing, but Daisy's spirit still felt very much alive in Emily's heart. She brought with her a simple stone she had engraved with Daisy's name, intending to leave it in that favorite spot as a tribute. Arriving at the clearing, Emily knelt down and placed the stone beneath a tree with soft, golden leaves scattered around it. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, letting the forest's calmness wash over her. For a moment, she could almost hear Daisy's gentle paws moving through the leaves, feel her warm presence by her side. "Thank you, Daisy," she whispered, her voice carrying a mixture of sadness and gratitude. "You were, and always will be, my greatest gift." As she rose to leave, a soft breeze swept through the clearing, rustling the leaves and stirring the air around her. Emily couldn't help but smile, feeling as if it was Daisy's way of saying goodbye, or perhaps even "I'm still here." Back at the shelter, life continued to flourish. Inspired by Daisy's legacy, Emily decided to expand the shelter's mission. She began working on a program that would train therapy dogs for emotional support, focusing on the importance of rest and self-care for the animals, just as she had learned with Daisy. It became known as Daisy's Way, a set of guidelines that emphasized not only caring for others, but also ensuring each animal's emotional needs were respected. Emily's shelter soon developed a reputation for this balanced approach, and adopters often commented on how calm and well-adjusted the animals seemed when they took them home. Many of these adopters would later send photos and stories, sharing how their new companions brought warmth and calm into their lives, carrying forward the essence of Daisy's work. One afternoon, a family arrived at the shelter, searching for a dog to help their young daughter, who struggled with anxiety. Emily introduced them to a gentle, quiet dog named Luna, a white-furred pup with a calm presence that reminded her of Daisy. As Luna walked over to the girl, she rested her head on her lap, sensing her need for comfort without words. The girl's face lit up as she stroked Luna's fur, her anxiety visibly melting away. Watching the scene unfold, Emily felt a familiar warmth. She saw a glimpse of Daisy in Luna, a continuation of the love and empathy that her beloved companion had instilled. It was as if Daisy's spirit lived on, not just in memory but in every life she had touched and every heart she had healed. As Emily looked around the shelter that evening, she felt a profound sense of peace. Daisy's presence might no longer be physical, but her impact was woven into every fabric of the shelter's mission. Through Daisy's Way, her legacy would continue to guide countless animals and people in the years to come. Returning home that night, Emily thought about how, even in the quietest moments, love leaves a lasting mark. Daisy had come into her life as a simple, abandoned stray with an extraordinary gift, and together they had created something truly beautiful. Emily knew that while she may one day share her life with another animal, there would always be a place in her heart that belonged only to Daisy. And in that silent understanding, she felt at peace, knowing that Daisy's gentle spirit would forever be a part of her, guiding her with every step.